Off this week's office hours. Thanks everyone for joining in, and we look forward to diving into your questions. Before we dive in, we have a couple of announcements from our end. I just want to remind anyone, especially if anyone's joining office hours for the first time, this is our weekly office hours that we have for those in US and EMEA, and it's weekly from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific time. And then we also have a monthly series for those who are in APAC as well, which is the second Wednesday monthly from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time for all semantic kernel questions. If you do have anything that comes up in between our office hours, please use our GitHub discussions. We go through and triage the discussions and issues daily as well. So from our releases, these are the same ones that I highlighted last week. And so if you haven't had a chance to look at Python 1.29.0, this is a great one to be able to see some of our new feature enhancements as well. And then similarly for .NET, I covered last week for 1.48.0. And so there's a lot of changes and a lot of updates in this package. And so if you haven't had a chance to go through and look at it, we recommend you take a minute to do that as well. And I'll put the link to this and a few other items in chat as well. In terms of our blog, we'll dive into a highlight from our Java team. But I do want to highlight two guest blogs that we've had, one of being able to orchestrate AI agents with semantic kernel plugins, and a deep dive of how you can go through and do that with sample code. And then there's also a great blog post we have around using semantic kernel for accessibility. And so there's a great use case of an individual in Europe as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Milder to go through some of our Java updates.
Hi, everyone. So, well, yes, this is a quick update from the Java side of Semantic Kernel. So we have just released version 1.4.4 RC1. And this update introduces the foundation for building agents in Java. Our goal here has been to follow the .NET implementation closely, only introducing the non-experimental features at this stage. And the key features include introducing support for agentic chat experiences. This is what we refer here as the agent chat, and adding some core agent samples. We have added the agent framework abstractions for extensibility. We have also added a basic chat completion agent implementation using the existing chat completion services. And it supports the tool call behavior, the existing tool call behavior, chat history threads, and an updated invocation context for the agent execution, which includes function choice behavior for OpenAI services, which is going to replace the older tool call behavior. And this new behavior follows the .NET naming and recommended usage, but we are still keeping tool call behavior for compatibility. And now, looking ahead for future releases, we will focus on continuing to reduce that technical gap that we have with all the .NET agent architecture. Also, we will be expanding into the remaining features that enable collaboration between multiple agents, and then adding more agent implementations, such as based on OpenAI Responses API or Amazon Bedrock. So yeah, basically, yeah, that's it for Java developers. Please try it out. And
Yeah, thanks so
we
much,
look
Milder.
forward
Are there
to
any
your feedback.
questions folks have on this? If not, we'll go into open discussion, but please, if you do have any questions around the RC1 for Java, feel free to come off of mute, put them in chat, or if you think of them later in GitHub discussions as well. So yeah, I would love to turn it over to open questions that folks have. If you want to come off of mute, I'll start to look through chat as well. I see, Logan, you have your hand up, and I see your question in chat. Would love to hear from you if you want to come off of mute.
Yeah, of course. So I'm using Dapper and Semantic Process Framework. semantic kernel process framework. I'm trying to implement a long running process. So I've been able to do that using like the local runtime, and that works fine. But when I've moved over to Dapper, I can't seem to get anything over 100 seconds without it basically erroring out. So what I'm looking for is an example of a long running process that uses Dapper for something that could be as long as like 10 minutes, an hour, or literally whatever.
Yeah, let me look through for our samples. I know there's some guidance change as well, and so let me get back to you. I'll email you as well because it looks like Ben is not on, but there are some changes that are coming as well, and so I'll get back to you with a good sample.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Logan. I see we have a couple more hands. Thomas, do you want to come off of mute? Actually, sorry, Mani, it looks like you're next, actually, if you want to come off of mute first.
Yes. So I'm trying to use Azure hosted DeepSeek model. So I have a serverless endpoint in Azure AI services, and I'm basically trying to create a chat completion agent using semantic kernel and basically use that endpoint for that agent. So I see that there is an Azure AI inference connector, and I'm able to add that service to the kernel. But what I'm looking for is then to use that service for a chat completion agent. I've tried a couple of things, but it seems to be not working. So
Yeah, thanks for the question. Are you using Python or .NET?
Python. Python.
Python. Perfect. Actually, looks like Tao, if you want to dive into some of the work you've done yeah, I haven't seen that issue before. But yeah, I'll turn over to Tao.
Yeah. What have you tried? And do you have any? Did you see any errors, or just can I get more details?
Yeah, would it be helpful if I share it in the internal Teams channel? I can share my code implementation with you there. So I have a kernel and I add Azure AI Inference Chat Completion Service to it with the model ID and the endpoint setup, right? And with the API key. And then I'm basically configuring a chat completion agent to use that service ID with a couple of other kernel arguments, which is pretty standard for how I'm configuring other chat completion agents, which use Azure OpenAI service as opposed to this serverless endpoint, which works totally fine. I can show you the error and the SDK that I'm using, and it breaks while invoking um, internally invoking the agent within the SDK.
Okay.
If
Yeah. Please post your code and questions on the internal channel, and then I can take a look at it, and then I can respond there.
Yeah, I'll do it right away.
Right.
And I
Perfect,
presume
thanks.
there's no sample for it, right, in the repo?
We do. Let me find it for you.
Perfect, thanks.
Perfect, thank you. While Tao is grabbing that sample, I'm going to go on to the next question. Looks like we have some other hands up. Thomas, do you want to come off of mute? We'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks. So I have a question on the OpenAI assistant agents. I'm trying to monitor the agent thread, specifically like the tool call and tool call response behavior. And so I'm using an OpenAI assistant agent thread and using the get messages async method to retrieve the messages, but it seems that when I look through that, it's only returning the user in the assistant messages. Whereas if I switch everything out for the chat completion agent and use the same get messages async method, it seems to return the tool calls and tool call responses. I'm wondering if maybe this is a limitation of the OpenAI response agent, or if this is just some bug or implementation thing.
Yeah, really good question. I know that there are some limitations. Chris, do you know specifically if this is a limitation versus a bug?
Yeah, it does. You said it was assistant versus chat completion. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. The so the tool calls in Assistant API are captured as part of the run interaction. So each thread, every time you generate a message, there's a run that's part of that thread that does the tool calling and produces the message. So while in chat completion, the tool calls are part of that message history, in the assistant API, they're embedded within that run execution, actually.
Okay. Is there any way in Semantic Kernel to access those runs through the agent?
You know, yes and no. Mainly not right now, although you do raise a good point. If you're using the assistant within group chat, you will see the tool calls as part of. Oh, you know what? The group chat history. I think if you let me take a note and I can explore this offline. But I think if you use the invoke options and intercept the messages, you might the tool call messages might be exposed through that.
I think, sorry for interrupting you, but I think that's possible by using API. You can, there is API method like get thread messages, and you can filter by thread ID and run ID.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you raised a good question on should the thread return those or not, also.
Okay. Awesome. I'll check that out. Thank you.
Great, thanks for the question. I see our next hand, Jacob. Do you want to come off of mute?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. So I'm working with the .NET framework, the C# SDKs, and I'm running a Bedrock client, and I'm trying to give it some MCP tools. But I've noticed that there's some capabilities of using plugins and then passing those to the model context protocol tools when you build the server. So I don't have to register an entirely new server or build a whole new server with the model context protocol if I just register it as with tools when I build it. And then I am able to set the, sorry, I'm just talking this out as I'm circling with it. And then I'm able to set the agent as the client. Does this sound like I'm doing something correct here?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Sergey, would you mind diving into this with MCP and the flow that Jacob's illustrating?
Yeah, just sure. So as far as I understand, you're using Bedrock AI connector. Is it correct?
Yes, so I'm using Bedrock. I've got some plugins with the Semantic Kernel, and then I'm trying to feed those plugins to the MCP library. So they're used as tools, and then I'm trying to feed that MCP server to the Bedrock client.
Okay, so as far as I understand, am I understanding right that you are trying to build MCP server?
Yes.
That you plan to access and expose a bunch of tools from that MCP server and access those tools in your Bedrock client on the client side. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And what exactly doesn't work here, or you want to make sure that you're doing things right, or?
I'm trying to make sure that I'm doing it correctly when I use plugins. So you can, in some of the documentation I read, I might be wrong about this. I read that you can just use Semantic Kernel plugins and then set them up as singletons in your program and then pass that to the
MCP C#
MCP
library.
server. Yes.
So that eventually you'll get MCP server, which will expose the semantic kernel function as MCP tools.
Yeah, so when sorry.
Yeah, that's valid scenario. So we have a sample showing how to do that, and I don't see problems with that at all. So I think it's the right way if you want to build MCP server out of the semantic kernel functions.
That's okay. I was just noticing that I just had the semantic kernel function attributes on it, and it didn't get it labeled as the MCP server. So I was just trying to make sure that would come across as correct.
Oh, yeah, it's correct. So you will need an extra line. Well, you actually will need a few lines. One line which will basically will convert kernel functions into the MCP tools. That's the first line. Again, so you will find that line in the sample that I will share in a second. And a few more lines. Those 2 lines will basically create a MCP server out of the host worker. Yeah, that's basically it.
Okay.
Let me find the example and share it.
Perfect. Thanks, Jerry. While you're finding that sample, I'm going to go on to the next question. If there's nothing else from you, Jacob.
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Tyler, do you want to come off me? We'd like to hear from you.
Hey, thank you. So I build out AI integrations for corporations. Woohoo. And one of the most common scenarios that I run into for getting RAG to an appropriate level for a production deployment in enterprise applications means that I usually have to go beyond vector RAG and vectorization of chunked documents. I end up usually having to implement some sort of knowledge graph implementation, whether it's graph RAG or path RAG, whatever. I've even used the Cosmos AI graph. And where I'm going with this is it seems like in enterprise integrations generally, one of the most common asks that I'm getting is for graph RAG support. And I know we have these native vector data store implementations, and we've been making good progress on that. But I haven't seen anything in the backlog for native topological reasoning, like native graph support. I was just curious if that has been discussed at all, whether or not we're seeing that request outside of my narrow view of the industry. So just curious
Yeah,
about
great
thoughts there.
question. We're definitely getting that request, and it's something that in our community toolkit that we'll be launching out. That's one of the samples that we're working on for GraphRag, and so you will see that coming
Okay.
shortly in the next couple of weeks. And so that's something that we are seeing if there are additional samples after that. So I'm happy to follow up with you. I see your
Yeah.
internal of the sample and kind of show you what we're working on. And if there
Okay.
are other requirements outside of that, happy to chat further and see how we can work on that. Is there some other items in the community toolkit we'll be diving into there?
Yeah, samples would be helpful, but I was curious about native support at similar to the vector data store.
Yeah, right now, it's kind of in our backlog and not prioritized right now.
Oh, it is.
But
Great. Okay. Yeah.
but it's
That
more kind of our long-term backlog, not something that in the
beautiful.
short term you'll be seeing.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you, Sophia.
And Tyler, when you say native support, what
Yeah.
do you have in mind there specifically?
That's fair. Data types for topological reasoning as a sort of a abstraction around how to conduct that. So similar to how you have for a variety of vector databases, common signatures you can use and connectors that can connect to those specific implementations. I would like a common set of interfaces for graph retrieval and reasoning.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, that makes sense. I suppose it'll be interesting to talk more about that.
Yeah, we're all
there
internal,
as
so we
well.
could probably sync up.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice, especially if the data design generally for retrieval could be merged. But that's a larger scope thing, so I don't expect that. Yeah,
that's good. Sophia,
cool.
please include me as well on the conversation.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
just
you.
gonna start
Thank you
a
all.
thread.
Beautiful.
Perfect. Thanks for the question, Tyler. I'm gonna go on to our next one. Hassan, would love to hear from you if you want to come off of mute.
Yeah. Hey all. So I have a question around, so what we're trying to build multi-agent. We have a multi-agent scenario where multiple agents involves into some workflow, and they will communicate with each other. So like some of it, like when agent work on a task and then hand it off, or kind of give back to some orchestrator, and then orchestrator pick the next agent and work on that. I noticed that today the group chat, it's kind of like limited, and it requires a lot of, especially like that is handled through prompting, and it's not working as expected. I don't know if a group chat is intended for some complex scenarios, where you have multiple agents involved, like handing it off and doing stuff, so either not sequentially, but for example, we trying to create an agent for invoicing, and then an agent for like purchase orders. So invoicing start doing its work and then hand it off to another agent, and so on and so forth. I'm not sure if the group chat will handle such a thing, because I tried to do it, but it required a lot of prompting. And I'm also like thinking, if we change something in those agents, then we need to go back and change a lot of like the prompting in the group chat. I recently noticed that Chris has his changes with the runtime, for runtime, in process runtime. So I started to get into that and trying to implement the handoff pattern there. I know he shared with me yesterday some details, but my question is that is there a timeline for the runtime to be released? And the other question I have is that if we have the agents needs to be distributed, like hosted by different teams, but then they all communicating with each other. Is this something that is coming, or something is possible today to do, or there will be a distributed runtime that's coming in the future?
Yeah, great questions. Really appreciate it. I'm glad that you started to look at process framework, because the first question scenario, I think, is a really good candidate for that. But I'll turn it over to Chris, specifically on group chat, for some of the questions that you had there.
Yeah, I think the most direct response to that question is something that's going to be coming in terms of we are going to have a preview available really soon, and some build announcements around our next steps around multi-agent orchestration that will be more conducive to distributed scenarios, and even potentially across teams. And then also, as part of that, we are also looking at the A2A, integrating with the A2A spec, which will very much support the idea of discovering and using agents. So very near future.
Okay. Are there any timeline? Because another alternative we were thinking about is to hack around Azure AI agents, like having those teams, like they go and create their own Azure AI agents, and then if an agent want to do that, like they will kind of communicating through some common thread between them. I don't know if that is more recommended.
Yeah, I mean, that's entirely valid, and that's not necessarily at odds with our agent framework. I mean, you can interact with and Azure agents as part of the framework. I mean, it just Semantic Kernel provides the code framework for integrating those things into your service or application.
But like to create a multi-agent, distributed multi-agent using the current framework, for example, or like current service like Azure AI agent, and yeah, I'm not sure if this is something that is worth going after, or waiting for the features that you mentioned.
Well, our landscape is going to be evolving very quickly. Let's just say that. We have a
Okay.
build timeline for the next set of announcements and maybe a preview just before that. But you know, as the room's heard, you know, we've been working in collaboration and consolidating a lot of our infrastructure and building blocks with the AutoGen team around agent orchestration, event-based, and you know, we're going to be building off the exact same agent runtime. And so it's kind of opening up a lot of doors in terms of what's possible.
Okay. And one last question. Are there any work happening for the authentication and the identity of agents that's running? Like in the future that will go and distribute or goes through
It's certainly been on our radar at times, and I think somebody just asked about this a couple weeks ago. I mean, this is becoming you know, more consistently requested and I think relevant. So it's on our backlog. You know, I agree with you. I think we need to find a but I think it's going to very much be prioritized over the next cycle. It's going to need to be because we keep getting the customer feedback, but you know, we're not actively looking at it in this moment.
Yeah, thank you. That's all.
Yeah.
Great, thanks for the question. It's going through chat. Looks like all of them are answered. So I'm going to keep on going through our raised hands. The next time I'm seeing Anurada, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing your name too. If you want to come off of mute, I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm kind of piggybacking on the timeline question. So I would like to know more about when Process Framework is projected to be in GA, and like what that release schedule is looking like, as well as what are the pieces that are not native AOT compatible as of now, and like what the plan is is the idea that SK will become completely native AOT compatible soon, or what parts aren't, just so we know. And then, yeah, I just want to confirm the agent framework's also already in GA, right?
Yes, the single agent framework is already in GA, and there'll be some further announcements there as well. For our process framework, there are aspects of it that we're looking to GA around build. I don't see that Ben is on, but actually, Sean, is this one that you would have scope for?
I think you know, a couple things there. One, our agent framework is in GA, with the exception of a few places that are marked. I think Chris was just talking about group chat.
Yeah.
And you know, as we kind of finish our convergence with AutoGen, that'll stabilize in terms of runtime there. As far as process framework, yeah, we're still committed to GA by the end of the middle of this year. That's kind of like our planning cycles are in 6 months time frame, and process framework is on track by you know, June, July of this year. But as Sophia said, we think we're gonna probably GA some small portion of it that we're pretty confident in, maybe even sooner than that. So stay tuned there. We're feeling fairly good. I know Ben has a couple of things he wants to get in before that. And so we're kind of waiting, you know, week by week to make sure we get that and stabilize it. But I think we're real close for at least the core piece. And then there's going to be a bunch of, you know, stuff around it that will continue to be in preview, and then we'll stabilize that over the next.
Okay, great. Cool. And then with native AOT, I guess with all these things that are being added, are those AOT compatible? And B, I wasn't exactly sure what parts aren't, but we are like very much so exploring that.
Yeah, I don't know if someone else has a definitive answer on that. I know we were planning to be here.
Yeah, on the native AOT, like, you know, we just did the core of Semantic Kernel to start with, but we are kind of like, you know, say for the new vector data stuff that we're working on graduating, like, you know, we want to make that native AOT as well. I think what would be useful is if you could kind of give us a list of, you know, what you need, and you know, then we can look to kind of prioritize that.
Okay. I need to dig that up, which parts we're using. Definitely the core stuff. Definitely the connector stuff. Yeah, I would need to pull it up to tell you exactly which.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, if you can share that with us now, there may be some constraints because there's places where we're depending on other packages, and it depends on what their status is. But yeah, if you can share that with us, we can we can look at prioritizing that.
Okay.
Just a quick follow-up. I see a question in the chat from Nina on GA. I know we kind of throw around our acronyms a lot at Microsoft. GA means general availability. So kind of the important phases of APIs within Semantic Kernel there's three of them. One is experimental. If an API is experimental, that's something that we're trying. We'll probably change a lot, may not even move forward. Something that we're looking at. Obviously, things are changing in the AI space every week. So we want to try out things in Semantic Kernel, see if they make sense. Then we move into the next phase, which is preview. So we have a number of APIs that are preview. That means this feature has a future. There's still things we're working on. We want to reserve the right to be able to change the API and change some of the functionality as we keep building it. But these are things that we are investing in, and will be major features and parts of Semantic going forward. And then when those preview APIs graduate to GA, which is general availability, that means at that point we're supporting them long term, making breaking changes. They're core parts of Semantic at that point. So we're confident building on top of the scaled enterprise applications. Hope that helps.
Thanks.
We may not do an RC for process framework. RC is something that we did for agents, our agent framework. We'll see. Still decided if we'll have like an RC milestone. The RC specifically for agents was because there was kind of one feature around threads that we wanted to get in, but everything else was knocked down. So RC is used elsewhere at Microsoft, but we kind of made it up as something to get folks to look at the agent framework as if it was built from GA, except for I don't know if we'll do RC for process framework.
Perfect. Thanks for the question, folks. I'm going to go to the other hands we have up. The next one I'm seeing, I don't see names to email. Dobrik, if you don't mind coming off of mute, we'd love to hear from you.
No, that's me. Hi, everybody. I was playing the last weeks and months with process framework, agent framework, and so on. In general, well done. Most of things work, but there are also things which don't work. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, or it is a lack of documentation. For example, I'm trying to define tools like Azure Function, like REST API, or anything else inside of the Semantic Kernel agent framework, and that doesn't work. Maybe I didn't configure something else, but I didn't find an example which is demonstrating that. I have been successfully doing this by using this, I think, Foundry SDK, or I don't know, where's the namespace, Microsoft.ai.project and so on, where you can everything do it step by step, which is not really the thing I would like to do. I would like to do it more with agents. This is the first thing. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe that doesn't work, but whatever it might be, it would be really great to share the samples which demonstrate how to do it. To recap, how to set up functions or any kind of local function executing inside of tools by using Semantic Kernel agent framework, REST function, REST API, and Azure function. This is what this is.
Yeah, thank you so much for the feedback and for going through and just diving into Semantic Kernel. For some of the function pieces, there are some updates to documentations that we're working on right now, but for the REST API with agents, I'll turn it over to Chris in particular to dive into.
That would be very important because these are major things, very important things which make actually Semantic Kernel powerful. Doing very easy things with little bit scripting in Python and so on, you can find it in Azure Foundry, but this is very limited. Semantic kernel is something for very, very powerful things. And these means go out of the box to some other services. That's what we do. That's one thing. Another thing, MCP, I saw now in a chat that you have provided some examples like Web API, MCP. That's great if that works. I didn't have time to do that. And another things regarding process framework, what is the state persistence strategy when we use the stateful steps? Where is this going to be saved? Everybody still there?
It broke up a little bit on my end at the end, but I heard, I think, the majority of it. For the API question, I do see that in chat, Mark has put a sample using Azure Agents and Open API. And then also the earlier question around, it looks like Chris has provided the answer in chat as well. And so if you want to take a look at those and see if that handles all your questions, do feel free to come back off of mute if it doesn't.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. I see we have a couple more hands. I'm going to go to Anis.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this question is specific to Chris. We had a conversation over the office hours a few weeks back about using the agent group chat with an orchestrator directing the flow to different agents. So Chris asked me to set up a sample. I set up a sample on GitHub. Chris, I sent you an email a couple of weeks back with the sample. So I'm following up on that. I can drop the sample on the chat if you want.
Yeah, could you drop it onto chat? I'm just scanning my email.
Sure, I will do that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to take a look at it.
When you get a chance, I mean, I'm not looking for an answer right now, but if you could use that, then spin up something, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
Perfect. I see that in chat. Thanks so much for putting that in. I'm going to go to our next hand before we go through chat. If there are any outstanding questions there. Jeevan, would love to hear from you if you want to come off of mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of pick up, that side conversation in chat, which is, about, using a web API as a client for, as a sampling client for, an MCP server, right? And I just want to kind of make sure that what I was trying to do made sense and nothing was kind of getting lost. So Sergey, what I was trying to kind of do over there is, this is the scenario. Request comes in, and let's say I have an assistant or an agent, persisted at my end, right, which has got a set of tools associated with it, right? So the user comes in with my internal ID for that particular agent, right? That agent gets created, and then it makes this, let's say, as a part of that invocation, right, there is a tool call which requires sampling, right? So this is the scenario where it's a web API call, but it is acting as a client for the MCP server. So was kind of looking for some guidance, or if there is an example, if somebody has kind of, done something, in this space.
There is sample, but that sample is slightly different from your scenario because that sample is showing how you can do sampling using the standard input-output protocol, right?
Yes.
So in theory, just changing the protocol from the standard input-output to SSE protocol shouldn't influence your scenario. So everything should keep working.
Mm-hmm.
So, and all the samples you saw in the semantic kernel repo regarding MCP is using the standard, not standard, but like MCP C# SDK library. And basically we are leveraging the capability of that library to do the samples. And that library can be used in order to create both server and client. And I've just did very quick search in the issues, and like it seemed there is an issue related to the sampling and SSE protocol. And what I would recommend you just to follow up on this issue and track that issue to see what would be the result. But again, so your scenario looks and sounds right, and like, I don't see any problems why it shouldn't work.
And just to kind of touch upon that again, given that it's a web API, right? At least in my mind, I'm kind of looking, the client, the MCP client, to be kind of like a singleton object, right? Not some is directly where I'm kind of thinking. Would that, again, does that make sense, right? You have a web API. Web API is a MCP client, but then that client which it kind of spins up is something which is more of a singleton thing, right? That's how I'm kind of thinking, but I wanted to kind of get your thoughts also on it if I'm on the right line, Sajay.
So the sampling thing is very interesting one because it allows the server call the client, which is, well, may feel like as an unnatural thing because like in the client server architecture, it's usually the client who is making the request to the server and the server basically responding to those requests, right? Not the other way around, except when we are talking about the like different chat experience or like such technologies as Signal R, for example, that allows you basically both way of communication. And I think the sampling may be implemented using this Signal R approach, where that will allow just server to communicate to the client. That's one thing. The other thing is, again, so the MCP protocol is being involved, and like at the moment, as far as I understand, is that the MCP server, or at least in the samples which I saw, is kind of like MCP server shouldn't talk to the AI at all. MCP server is kind of like a server that's sharing some common resources that client can leverage somehow, right? And that's where this sampling kind of like a shine, because like in case server doesn't have access to AI, but the server for some reason need to access to AI, so the server will send request to the client, and the client will intercept that request and just show a nice dialog to the user saying, hey, just like there is server require access to this AI model, and it wants to do certain things with AI. Do you want me to proceed with this? Do you allow? Should I allow or should I deny? So basically, all AI communication going through the client so that the client can see what's going on, who is trying to access AI model and for what purposes, right? So server doesn't do anything to the AI. So that's another aspect of that sampling. And yeah, answering your question, is it right or not? According to the protocol, it's the right thing.
Okay. And so if you don't mind, could you pose that bug which you kind of referred to in the chat window? Super appreciated.
Okay, yeah, I'll do, sure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Great, thanks for the question, Jeevan. I really appreciate it. I'm seeing there's a couple of questions in chat around process framework and with Ben's conflict. If you could post them in GitHub discussions, like Mark had mentioned, for any of those, that would be really great for follow-up, and we'll connect with you there. Just looking through chat, I'm not seeing any other direct questions for semantic kernel. Looks like there's some back and forth. Is there any other questions that folks have or anything else in chat that people want to bring up? Would love to hear from you.
Oh yeah. My question with process framework was just the declarative spec specifically, if that's part of the smaller subset that might be ready earlier, or if that would be part of GA.
It's still in development, and so I will defer to Ben on whether or not we'll have that out for the declarative spec earlier versus a later GA.
Okay.
Perfect. And I'm seeing there's a hand up too. Thomas, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I was just curious if there's any update on the OpenAI responses agent. I know there's a PR open for that now, but I was just curious if there's any update on maybe when that would be ready.
Yeah, good question. Mark had you posted some of the items out. I didn't know if there was a final state we had gone to with them.
Yeah, so on the responses agent, yeah, we just need to get streaming implemented and then it'll get merged in. So it'll probably be next week at this point.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much.
Great, thanks for the question. Any other questions that folks have? I'll continue to stay on, but we may wrap up early if there aren't any other questions, but feel free to come off of mute
I
if
have
people
one
do have questions.
question.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Donovan speaking, if it's okay. I was interrupted previously. I'm in a car, sorry. So the question regarding process framework, and what I didn't understand in all this is how is there some kind of checkpointing when you run the process? The process is long running and then it crashes after 5 days execution. What happened with that?
Sorry, it's breaking up a little bit for me, but what I heard was for a process framework,
So
and if there's a
once again,
step.
process framework is long running, has multiple steps, and regarding checkpointing feature, I read somewhere in the documentation that this is supported, but it's not clear what does it mean and how it works. Is it that when you run the long running process in some specific step, which is taking a days, let's say, and if the process crash or is restarted as a process, technical process.exe or something else, is there a checkpointing which makes the process framework to run my process on the place where it was crashed or stopped?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's one that we are looking into. And so if you don't mind putting this one in GitHub discussions, I know Mark had mentioned that as well. Ben, our engineer, is not on. And so there are some processes from Human in the Loop and others that would be able to help with long running process, but it'd be a good one to put in GitHub discussions if you don't mind.
No, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions that folks have? If there are no other questions, I'll go ahead and end the recording, but I'll stay on. So if there are other things, please feel free to come off of mute, and we'd love to hear from you.
I had a